r/AskReddit. Men who proposed, and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? We were living together. I asked. She said, no, I love you, but I need to think about it. I don't think I'm ready yet. Can you give me some time and ask later? A few months go by, I ask again. Same response. A few more months, same deal. A couple more weeks, and then she says, hey, what do you think of us getting married? I replied, that's an excellent idea, why didn't I think of that? Our 39th anniversary is next month. I was expecting the story to get worse and worse, but it ended up better. Dated a woman for over 2 years and popped the question. First time she said, I don't know. A couple months later I asked her again. She said, maybe. I was pretty bent out of shape. But then I found out she was sleeping with several of my friends, so I dodged a bullet there really. Sounds like you dodged a gang shootout, mate. Those weren't your friends. I'm glad you said that. My friend made me feel guilty for not wanting to be friends anymore after he was messing around with my ex. He still tries to reach out years later, but I say duck that guy, then second guess myself for 2 weeks. I wish he would just go away, so I wouldn't have to feel anything about it anymore. We lived together for another 6 years until she changed her mind and told me that I should ask again. We were engaged for over a year and got married in 1991. We are still married, have 3 children, and are both still very much in love. Why the initial no? Didn't have enough XP. Plus he didn't complete the prerequisite quests. Or buy the Ring DLC. She said yes on the second proposal and now we are divorced. After reading all these stories, I laughed when I read this. Not at your misfortune, but at how succinct it was. My therapist had a similar reaction on our first meeting. He laughed at the end and said, most people don't describe their childhood as catastrophic and live up to it. Man, this comment section is like the autobahn with speed bumps. Hope you're doing alright these days. She had said she wasn't really a fan of marriage, so I thought proposing non-marriage might be well received, and I wanted us to be together for the rest of our lives. So I asked her not to marry me. She said no. We have been married for 10 years. Pulled the old reverse card on her. It was really bad for a while. Then it was really bad. Then it became really bad. Then it became bad. Then it was just blah. Then it was neutral. Then things started to get better. They continued to get better by me learning to be happy and me doing me things. I eventually found someone else, and things have been getting better for 20 years now. I asked her right out of high school, but she wasn't ready. We stayed together, went to college at the same school, spent the first year in separate dorms, then moved in together. Got married a few years later. Our 20th is coming up. She said yes as I had a special occasion planned, one of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top and we were in our way to a family event and I had a ring made and everything. Then a few days later she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance, other side of the world. When I visited it would be super awkward. Eventually he dad kicked me out. Was flying standby and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I'm happily married and I'm glad it never worked out. I was not in a good place when I met her and her family was super controlling. It would never have worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than expected. Just curious why you would ask someone to marry you if they lived on the other side of the world. We would see each other every few months. I would travel to the US 3 to 4 times a year and she came to the UK the other times. She worked for an airline, so it was either free for her or cheap for me. Love does strange things to you. She had cancer. I said we should get married because I had full medical coverage from my work. She said no, and over time we grew apart. Haven't talked to her in 15 years, don't know if she died. I know a couple who did just that. He proposed in order to give her citizenship and health insurance so she could remain here and get cancer treatment she desperately needed. They stayed married for about 15 years and he even adopted her son, but they never lived together or were romantically involved. Years later, they divorced when he met the woman of his dreams and wanted to get married. They are all very close friends, with no drama. She lived and is a university professor now. He is in another state with the woman of his dreams. That's actually beautiful. Very first girlfriend ever. Started dating at 17. After 6 years of dating I proposed. She said no, I'm sorry. I asked why. She said, I've been thinking about this for a while, but didn't talk to you about it. I found someone else. Then she broke up with me right then and there. I asked if she cheated, and she said no. We are just friends right now. But he makes me happy when I'm with him and you just don't. You used to, but not anymore. I tried sabotaging their relationship when I found him begging her for nudes, tattled to her ultra-Christian parents that he was twice her age, which he is, and did everything I could to be the insane one. Finally realized what I was doing, apologized, promised to never talk to her or her family ever again. I sold the ring and used the money to buy a guitar and a boatload of weed and spiraled out of control for 3 years. Flunked all my classes, got a dead-end job at a construction gig, slowly descended into borderline alcoholism. Couldn't leave the house, or go to work, or do my job without being high. Gained a ton of weight, let myself go. Finally contemplated suicide, planned it out with a 20-page instruction manual on how to make it painless, not screw it up, and not hurt anyone in the process. Never went through with it, because I kept getting scared and spending my suicide fund on weed and alcohol. Finally broke down and told my parents all of this. Asked for help. Spent another year in a rehab program with a therapist. Got out and have been clean for 3 years by this September and still wake up at 3 AM feeling sick every couple of months for the way I treated her after having spent 6 years telling her that I loved her. But that's all over now, and all I can do is learn from it, promise to be better, and keep going. So now I'm turning 29 in a week, still living at home with parents, and constantly battling self-loathing and anxiety while working a job for $9.25 an hour. But I pay my parents $300 a month to stay with them, and I'm going back to school. Taking the minimum number of credit hours per semester, since I'm paying for it out of pocket, and I work full-time and overtime when I can get it, but slowly dragged my GPA from a 1.28 to a 2.64, and can start getting help next semester instead of paying for all of it out of pocket. I also lost a ton of weight during the pandemic and weighed just 189. In rehab I dropped to 220, but I was closer to 245 to 250 before that. Safe to say I won't be worth dating for a long time, but maybe when I get my degree under my belt and finish growing and learning I can get a self-sustaining job. I can move out and truly start over. You've already come a long way and you should be very proud of what you have accomplished so far. That's a lot to go through, and I'm glad that you are seeing the light at the end of tunnel. I was the person who said no. We had only known each other for 3 months, and he was smitten. I was more cautious. I said no, I like you, but it's way too soon. He asked when would be enough time. I said maybe a year. He proposed again at midnight, 1 year after we first met. I said yes, and we have been together 8 years now. I was expecting this to go down in flames, but ended up making me smile. My mom rejected my father the first 2 times, lol. There was no real hard feelings between them. I guess my mother was just not ready for marriage yet. She ended up proposing to him. My grandmother and mother sewed a suit for their dog to wear and attached a sign around his neck with a ring that read, "Will you marry me?" Then she sent the dog out into the kitchen to beg for scraps while my father was preparing dinner. The next thing she heard was a very concerned voice shouting, "Honey, the dog is asking me to marry him." Cue absolute hysterics. My dad said yes to the proposal. My parents are still married 2 decades later. Plot twist, the dad wanted to marry the dog. I was a young Marine. I was only home during the weekends. Was dating this girl for about a year from my hometown. When I asked, she said yes. Her dad, former Navy, kept saying we should wait. We put it off for a bit longer. Fast forward another year. She dumped me. Father informs me she has been sleeping with a lot of guys, like more than 50 over the 2 years we dated. And was very happy I didn't marry her. He also apologizes to me for her behavior. She then totally ghosting everyone including her family for about 6 months. Find out she moved 7 hours away and was living under a house, not a basement, under a house with her new boyfriend. She calls her mom to come get her. Mother and father ask me to go get her and bring her home. Good times, good times. Well, did you? Yep, I was not a smart man. My mum actually said no to my dad's proposal when they were younger. Not because they weren't in love, but because she wasn't sure if it was something she actually wanted to do, rather than something that society expected of her, or whatever. They still stayed together and had kids, hence why you're reading this now. And then when my dad was terminally ill a few years ago, my mum plucked up the courage and asked him. Just to get her back after all those years, he said no, before taking her up on the offer a few days later. He died a happy man. Not sure if this count, but I proposed. She said yes, but 1 month before the wedding she took it back. This is what happened immediately with my life. I personally lost about $3,000 worth of deposits. My parents and her parents lost about $4,000 each on deposits. Me and my parents are working class, so it took years for us to financially recover from this. I spent $2,200 on a ring I didn't want. My biggest regret, and will say this anyone who listens. The engagement ring chain I bought it from wouldn't take it back. I took it to pawn shops and they'd only offer a few hundred. This engagement ring store bank on customers who wants the whole ring, stone, band, setting. If you're going to buy a ring, just buy the stone or gold band setting. You can get a better deal from a local jewelry store. Apparently my gem I bought was shit. Most of the cost of the ring was BS. Most of my family was from out of state, and a lot of people were pissed because they cancelled their flight. I had to go to the ER. So I didn't leave my room. I couldn't take any calls because everyone was pissed, and I didn't want to hear it. I was depressed and just stayed in bed. One day my roommate grabbed me and took me to the ER where the doctor treated me for severe dehydration and an infection. What happened when I got over it? I became stronger for it. I didn't propose to anyone until a decade later. Honestly, there wasn't anyone that I didn't love deeply enough to be in a committed relationship. But when I proposed, I was in my 30s. Our relationship was more mature than my first time I proposed. We are now married for 13 years. She's my best friend. When I have good news, she's the first person I want to tell it to. When I have bad news, she's the first person I want to tell it to. I financially recovered as well. I learned my lesson about the engagement ring. Only paid $300 for it. She loved it and treasures it. After our 10-year milestone, we were doing so well. I told her to pick a wedding ring of any cost. She refused. She still wears that cheap $300 ring and loves it. The huge markup on jewelry isn't unique to engagement rings, although it is probably highest with them. I've heard it's normal for a 70-80% profit margin on jewelry in shops. Because of that, some places, especially if not part of a chain, will accept a lower offer for 4-figure prices, so try your luck, just not in front of the girlfriend if she's picking her own. Don't expect 70% off, but depending on the margin of the specific item and how hard it is to find a buyer, you could save a sizable amount. Of course you could save more money having one custom made. A friend of mine did this, and he's adamant he saved thousands for one of the same value from a shop. I spoke to her about it beforehand, and she seemed really keen on the idea. So I decided to propose about a week after in front of all our friends. She was so shocked she picked me up off my knee and shooed me away. Most of our friends were confused because everyone knew it was going to happen, and she said she was excited for it. I didn't know what to do. It was all really embarrassing, and later she explained she didn't mean no, she just didn't know what to say and was scared. She said yes after apologizing profusely, and just this year we celebrated our 9th anniversary. In 2017, Google came up with this idea to allow you to make photo books out of your Google Photos account. My girlfriend and I had been dating for almost 2 years and I knew she was the one I wanted to marry, so I created this wonderful photo book of all of our selfies together and ended it with a page made out of a photo I generated that said, "Will you marry me?" I then proceeded to put all these things into an album and build the photo book. What didn't occur to me at the time was that the album I put these in was a shared album and the other person gets a notification when you add new photos to it. And the other person that the album was shared with, my girlfriend. That evening, we had dinner and it all came out. She saw the photo, she wasn't ready. There were a few reasons why, but they were good reasons and smart reasons, mostly to do with timing, family, and finances. We weren't breaking up, we just weren't getting engaged at that time. A year later, we have fully discussed the concept of getting married. We went ring shopping, she picked her own ring, and by the time I actually did propose we both knew what her answer would be. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary in April. It seems to have worked out so far. And the photo book is on a shelf to my left as we speak. I'm a firm believer that the only surprise in a proposal should be how you are proposing, not that you are. She or he should know that it is going to happen at some point, but not know how. Marriage is a big deal and should be discussed extensively beforehand as it is a huge legal agreement. I'm glad it ended up working out for you. The photo book idea is really sweet. My friend John had been with his girlfriend Kate for years, so he decided he wanted to propose. What he didn't know is that Kate was also thinking about proposing to him. John proposed first, and Kate freaked out because she had already set her proposal and bought a ring, so she said no. Over the next week, Kate freaked out more and more and refused to answer John's calls and messages. John then decided to use the money he had saved up to buy a plane ticket to Europe. What was supposed to be a 3-month trip through Western Europe turned out to be a year-long trip around the world. One day, John says that he's coming back, and Kate decides to go and wait for him at the airport and propose to him there. It turns out that, while being in Peru, John met a girl and they fell in love almost immediately and got married in Peru. 5 years later, John and his Peruvian wife are still happily married and recently had a baby, while Kate hasn't still quite forgiven herself for ruining her relationship with John. I don't understand why Kate would say no if that was what she wanted to. I can understand the initial no if she wanted to do her plan instead, but cutting off all contact was a fatal mistake.